Hello again. This is Pastor Jason with Love and the Truth, and we're on our very last section of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We're going to read a passage today. I'm going to read the whole thing, not just one verse, and because it's highly controversial, especially within the church. And honestly, quite often we've allowed it to divide our churches in North America more than they should be. But I want to read it, give you my thoughts on it, and then maybe a little bit of application, what it looks like. So let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 8 through 13. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, and then I shall be fully known, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Beautiful passage. And honestly, the heart of this is love is more important than all these things. That's the whole heart of this passage, and it's really sad that a lot of times we allow everything to get in the way of the main idea that love is better than tongues, love is better than prophecy, love is better than all these things because they all cease. That's the point. Now, let me give you my ideas and my thoughts about this verse. And I understand that you may disagree with me. That's fine. I would hope that we could disagree and still love, which is the whole point of this verse. I don't believe that tongues have ceased. I don't believe that prophecies have ceased, because this text doesn't say that. It says they will cease. Matter of fact, it gives a time frame of when prophecies and tongues cease. Notice what it says. It says, for we know in part, we are prophecy in part, but when the perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. Well, see, there's a lot of people who say the perfection is the Bible. Now, I have a problem with that, because the Bible never in the New Testament is called the perfection, ever. So there's a whole strain of scholars, and this used to be commonly held, they were called cessationists. And what they meant by that was, they meant that this passage taught that when the Bible was fully completed, tongues ceased. And their reasoning was, you could see the reasoning. Their reasoning is that there would be no reason for someone to use a foreign language that they didn't know to communicate God's word if God's word was printed. Okay. The problem with that is it ignores the purpose of the tongues. The purpose of tongues was for a sign that God was doing something supernatural. Now, if that's true, then it has very little to do with the Bible in that sense. It has more to do with showing people that God's at work currently, because this is a supernatural sign. Now, I take tongues to actually mean a language spoken in a foreign language that the person who is saying it doesn't understand what they're saying, and the person who's listening actually can understand what they're saying. That's the reason why there has to be an interpreter and someone speaking in tongues for it to happen in church. Now, at Lazy Mountain, we don't practice tongues in public because we want unity. And I think that the whole New Testament, especially Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, he talks about this being done in order, because if it's done out of unity, it's a bad deal. At the same time, I would have to say that a lot of tongues today probably aren't the tongues done in the New Testament. Matter of fact, Paul talks about if I speak the tongue of angels, and he's going to talk about that in 1 Corinthians 14, the next chapter. I don't take it to mean that Paul means that talking in tongues is something unintelligible. I'm taking it to mean that when Paul says, if I talk the tongue of angels, he's using figure of speech. He's saying, even if I were to talk the tongue of angels, in which he isn't, would be an intelligible tongue that someone from a foreign language would understand. By the way, we have a very good example of this on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. When all the disciples are in the upper room, they start talking in tongues. Same word in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, glossia. And when they start talking in tongues in Acts chapter 2, all the people from the areas of Rome understand them in their native language. See, this is the gift of tongues. And so although I will not come down hard on our fellow brothers and sisters who are charismatic, which I totally think they're our fellow brothers and sisters, and no, I don't think churches should divide over this issue, which is the reason why we don't highlight it here at Lazy Mountain Bible Church. At the same time, we can't put God in the box and say that he's done with tongues. I don't really think that's true. We also can't put God in a box and say he's done with prophecy. For if we do, now we have to take out Revelation chapter 11, where there's two prophets at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem in the end times calling down fire. So are you really ready to limit God to only the Bible? I don't think so. But lest we miss the whole point, this entire section of Scripture is not about spiritual gifts of speaking in tongues and prophecy. His whole emphasis is love takes a prominent place amongst the spiritual gifts. And if we use the spiritual gifts without love, we might as well not use them, which is the whole reason why we strive for unity at Lazy Mountain Bible Church. It's the reason why we shouldn't divide over spiritual gifts. God bless you. Have a great day.